David Kepes is a professor of practical criticism who discusses literature on a live show every week. Though advanced in age, he remains passionate about his field. Consuela Castillo, one of his students, is well-mannered and carries herself with elegance, which David finds striking. To avoid complications, David is careful not to have personal interactions with his students, especially since the school posted the sexual hotline number. However, he always hosts a cocktail party for the class after they receive their grades. During the party, he can't seem to take his eyes off Consuela, and eventually walks up to her. Consuela urges David to be less formal and address her by her first name, since they're not in class. However, David admits there's something about her that naturally invites formality. He sees an elegant austerity in her, which surprises Consuela. As they talk, she shares a bit about her background, and David is enraptured. Eventually, he invites her to a theater where he reviews plays for a magazine, and she gladly accepts. The next morning, while playing tennis, David tells his friend George about the invitation. However, George doesn't see the need for the outing. George advises David to keep his sexual relationships uncomplicated, but David feels that Consuela is different. She's someone who needs to be wooed. Later that night, David and his lover, Carolyn, share a passionate evening together. Afterward, David receives a call, but ignores it after checking the caller ID, letting it go to voicemail. It turns out to be his son, Kenny, with whom he has an estranged relationship. Despite his successful career as a doctor and a happy marriage with kids, Kenny still holds David responsible for abandoning his mother. Though David has tried to mend things between them, their relationship remains strained. The next day, David takes Consuela to the theater to see a play. Afterward, he invites her for drinks, but Consuela feels shy about being seen in public with a well-known figure, preferring to avoid unwanted attention. Instead, David invites her to his house. At his house, David plays the piano for Consuela, and she compliments his skill. He then takes her to his dark room, revealing that he once pursued photography, though his busy schedule has kept him from it. Later, as they go through a book together, David finds himself unable to resist her beauty and the way she makes him feel. The moment turns intense, leading to a passionate encounter between them. The next day, David updates George about what happened, believing he's just a fleeting experience for Consuela. He feels that she'll only remember him as the older man who introduced her to a bit of culture. George, however, urges him to stop worrying about aging and simply be grateful for the one-time experience. However, their relationship doesn't remain a one-time encounter. David and Consuela grow closer, sharing many intimate moments and reveling in their passion for each other. After a fun time, Consuela asks how many women David has been with, but he turns the question back on her instead. She admits to having been with 5 boys and reveals that the most extreme thing she ever did was getting involved with 2 at once. This surprises David, but Consuela dismisses it as a reckless teenage phase. Soon after, jealousy begins to take root in David. He feels the need to speak to her every day, though he knows it's only a matter of time before a younger man takes her away from him. That fear doesn't stop him from kissing her passionately in public. While at a diner with George, David confesses that being with Consuela makes him realize how different they are. George advises him to end the relationship, believing Consuela will eventually leave him, and that David will only be held back by his attachment to her. He suggests that David take her to a romantic spot and break things off. However, the next day, David does the exact opposite. He promises to take Consuela on trips around the world. Later, he tries to invite her to dinner, but she tells him she has plans to meet her brother. This surprises David because she has never mentioned a brother before. It makes him realize how much he still doesn't know about her. He drops her off, and before she leaves, they share a passionate kiss. Afterward, David can't stop thinking about what Consuela is up to, and eventually heads to the club she mentioned. When she notices him there, she is not pleased. David quickly makes up a story, claiming he was just passing through, but Consuela doesn't believe him. She warns that if he wants their relationship to last, he needs to start trusting her. Eager to make amends, David promises to call her later, but Consuela refuses, insisting that she'll be the one to call when she's ready. 2 days later, David has lost all hope, convinced his jealousy and possessiveness have ruined everything. But then, to his surprise, Consuela calls. They meet for dinner at a restaurant, where she admits she has been thinking a lot about their relationship. Consuela asks David what he truly wants from her and whether he has ever imagined a future with her. She points out that he spends his life moving through relationships without truly bonding with anyone. David admits he's afraid of a future with her because of their 30-year age gap. He believes it's only a matter of time before she realizes she has her whole life ahead of her. Despite this, they end up at his house, sharing another passionate night together. A few days later, Carolyn surprises David with a visit. They eventually share an intimate moment, because David sees her as a connection to the confident man he once was. However, Carolyn later discovers a tampon in his bathroom and confronts him about being with other women. Carolyn feels disappointed, reminding David that their arrangement is rare. Their relationship is free of hidden agendas and entanglements. In response, David quickly makes up a story, claiming the tampon must belong to one of the women George brings over to escape his wife. Carolyn doesn't believe him, but when he insists she's the only thing he's holding on to, her anger softens. Despite this, David doesn't end things with Consuela. They go on a beach date, where he takes photographs of her captivating beauty. She playfully mouths that she loves him, but David doesn't catch it. Consuela wonders if he simply doesn't want to hear it. Maybe that's the real problem with him. He's so dazzled by her beauty that he fails to see her heart. Back home, he prints the beautiful pictures in his darkroom. Unable to let go of her, David admits he needs Consuela like the air he breathes. They go shopping together, and on their way back, they spot George at a restaurant with another woman. Consuela is disgusted by this, but David urges her to keep walking, insisting it's none of their business. Curious about his thoughts on the affair, she asks him directly. David admits he sees marriage as a flawed institution, using his own failed marriage as an example. Before long, a year passes, and his relationship with Consuela continues to thrive. During a dinner date, she invites him to a party her parents are hosting to celebrate her graduation. David hesitates, having already turned down her last 2 invitations to meet her family. Frustrated, Consuela accuses him of hiding from her life. Eventually, he agrees to attend, which makes her excited. David later updates George, expressing his fears of being judged by Consuela's family because of their age difference. George, however, insists it's time he faces the reality of their relationship. On the day of the party, David arrives at the venue but hesitates. Unable to bring himself to go inside, he sits in his car, overwhelmed by doubt. Eventually, he calls Consuela and lies, claiming his car has broken down and he's stuck on the road. Consuela immediately sees through the excuse. Heartbroken and disappointed, she ends the call. When David returns home, he checks his voicemail and finds a message from her. Consuela expresses how heartbroken she is. She truly wanted David at the party because he means so much to her. She tells him that she loved him deeply, leaving David overwhelmed with sadness. It seems he has finally succeeded in ruining their relationship. While drowning in regret, David receives an unexpected visit from Kenny. His son confesses that he's having an affair and doesn't know who else to talk to. Though he loves his wife and kids, he can't bring himself to end things with the other woman because she makes him feel alive. David is shocked to learn that the woman has 3 children and struggles to make sense of the situation. He advises Kenny to keep the affair a secret until he figures out what he truly wants. However, Kenny reveals that he has already told his wife. David believes the only solution is separation since Kenny can't seem to leave the other woman. However, Kenny refuses, insisting he won't make the same mistake David did by walking out on his family. He feels it would destroy them. David is baffled, pointing out that Kenny and his mother survived the separation. But Kenny doesn't see it that way. Frustrated, he storms out, and it seems their already fractured relationship may never be repaired. Days pass with no word from Consuela. David's world feels empty. He refuses to eat or get out of bed until George finally forces him up, reminding him that the relationship was bound to end eventually. David confesses that he truly loved Consuela and has never felt anything like it before. George, however, urges him to move on and get back to his life. He suggests that David introduce him at a poetry reading he's giving at New York University next month. Although David refuses, saying he's not in the right headspace to write anything, George doesn't take no for an answer. On the day of the event, David delivers a flawless introduction for him. However, as George proceeds to step onto the podium, he suddenly collapses. Later, David visits George at home and realizes how much his health has deteriorated. Moments later, George passes away unfortunately, leaving David consumed by grief. After the funeral, Carolyn visits David to offer her condolences. Eventually, he opens up about his relationship with Consuela. David feels he and Carolyn have been acting like teenagers, chasing after nothing. After 20 years in a purely physical relationship, he and Carolyn have nothing meaningful to show for it. David eventually ends the relationship. Time moves on, but despite continuing with his life, David struggles to cope. Even after 2 years, he hasn't fully come to terms with the loss of George or Consuela. Surprisingly, on New Year's Eve, he receives a voicemail from Consuela. She shares that she has something important to tell him. leaves her number, and urges him to call her back. David listens to her voicemail on repeat, fear gripping him as his mind races through endless possibilities. With shaky hands, he finally calls her back. Consuela asks to see him, and he instantly invites her over. When she arrives, she delivers heartbreaking news. Unfortunately, she has breast cancer and is scheduled for surgery in 2 weeks. David is stunned, overcome with emotion, and bursts into tears. He asks why she never told him sooner, but Consuela admits she couldn't bring herself to. She makes a request that only he can fulfill for her. She wants him to take a picture of her uncovered, preserving a memory of her body as it is. David fulfills her request, capturing the moment with a heavy heart. The mood is somber, weighed down by the devastating news. Afterward, he suggests going with her to the hospital on the day of her surgery, but Consuela doesn't give him an answer. He urges her not to go through it alone, which feels ironic, because he has spent most of his own life in solitude. Consuela admits she's terrified of what's to come, and David holds her close as the city erupts in celebration for the new year. The next day, unable to stay away, David visits the hospital to learn more about her condition. Kenny makes some calls and informs him that her surgery is scheduled for the following day. David is stunned, since Consuela had told him it's in 2 weeks. Kenny admits that the situation might not be good, but explains that he can't access more details since Consuela isn't his patient. David is at a loss about what to do, overwhelmed by an unbearable sadness. Kenny then gets a call and has to get back to work. As David stands to go, he asks about Kenny's family, and Kenny assures him they are still together. Kenny wonders what David plans to do about Consuela, but David has no answers because he feels lost. The next day, David receives a call from Kenny, informing him that Consuela's mastectomy was successful and that she has been moved out of the ICU. Without hesitation, David rushes to the hospital. When he arrives at her room, he immediately goes to her side. With tears in her eyes, Consuela tells him they had to remove her entire breast. She didn't think he would come, believing she is no longer beautiful, but David assures her she is. To lift her spirits, he tells her about the legendary Amazonian warrior women who cut off a breast to shoot arrows more efficiently. The story manages to bring a small smile to Consuela's face. She admits she will miss him, but David promises he isn't going anywhere this time. He gets into bed beside her, wrapping her in a warm embrace.